Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Langford. Senator Hassan.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chairman, and to you and the ranking member for this hearing. Good morning to our nominees, and congratulations on your nominations to you and your families, because I know this is a full family effort. I'm going to start with a question, and with respect to my colleague from Oklahoma, I want to be very clear. I ask all nominees this question: if directed by the president to take an action that would break the law, would you follow the law or follow the president's directive? And I'm not talking about regulatory interpretation that courts decide. That's part of our democracy. I'm talking about a president whose OMB director sat in front of me in a committee hearing and said he did not believe that he or the president had to follow the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, even though the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that it is constitutional. So right down the line, if you're directed to take an action by the president that would break the law, are you going to follow the law or the president's directive, Mr. Switzer?
I will follow the law.
Mr. Shirah.
I don't think I'd be asked to do that, but I'm an attorney and I follow the law.
I was in Trump 45, honored to serve in that role. I was never asked to violate the law, and I believe if President Trump were here right now, he'd say, Mike Stewart, follow the law.
Well, good, because he pardoned a bunch of people who attacked police officers and were convicted by a jury of ordinary Americans. Mr. Thurr.
Senator Hassan, I don't expect I would ever be asked that, but irrespective of the actions of others, I will follow the law.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so we got Senator Hassan coming in, and she just starts off just rolling with it, right? Just does not even give a damn. She just starts out lying. Okay, now my parents live up in New Hampshire, so this lady represents them, so this kind of hits home for me. She actually does not represent them, especially on their views. But, you know, the lies just come right out of the gate. She doesn't even give a damn about anything about telling the truth, because that's not what Russ Vought said. He said he doesn't think the Impoundment and Control Act was applicable to whatever they was talking about. I don't remember exactly what they were talking about at the time, but I do remember that committee hearing, and I remember exactly what he said for the most part, right? Like, I don't remember it verbatim, so I'm not going to try to repeat it and get it wrong, but that's essentially what they were talking about. But you know, we're going to get into some stuff because she covers a range of topics, and we're going to discuss these things. And some of these topics are very, very important. So y'all smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. And if you would be so inclined, I would be deeply appreciative if you would look right below the video and click that join button. Sign up and become a member. That would be just the bee's knees, if you will. But without any further ado, let's get it, y'all.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart, we share a commitment to ending the scourge of the fentanyl epidemic. I represent New Hampshire, and as you know, our 1.4 million people have been devastated by the fentanyl epidemic, just as the people of West Virginia have. Addiction medicine doctors across the country agree that methadone is one of the most effective medications to treat people with opioid use disorder. In his testimony before Congress, Secretary Kennedy said that medication-assisted treatment is a critical tool for preventing overdose deaths. This is one area where Secretary Kennedy and I agree. As a state senator, you introduced a bill that would have outlawed methadone clinics in your state, which would have effectively ended the use of methadone to treat opioid addiction in West Virginia. I understand that there are bad actors in the methadone clinic space, to be sure, but do you think Secretary Kennedy is wrong to support medication-assisted treatment like methadone?
So I thank you for the question very much, and it's such an important question, and it rides inside my soul, and at times of the essence, but I support and agree with Secretary Kennedy full-heartedly on the issue of medically assisted treatment. That story that you're talking about in terms of methadone, the issues of methadone, Suboxone, other treatment methodologies with respect to the opiate scourge or people who suffer with substance abuse disorder, one of the most important things they get is they need wraparound services with that.
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to get at, so you'll support efforts at the department to expand access to all types of medication-assisted treatment, including both methadone and buprenorphine?
I'm going to support Secretary Kennedy on this issue. I agree with him on it, but keep in mind there's a difference between being a policymaker policymaker in
No,
West Virginia.
I just want to understand
Yeah.
that you agree that the gold standard here is medication-assisted treatment for fentanyl addiction in particular. Buprenorphine's important. Doctors can now prescribe it in their offices. It's really important. I agree that wraparound services are also important. I just wanted to make sure that we're clear on that. Let me move forward to Mr. Chiarello. If confirmed, you'd oversee the distribution of grant funding that Congress appropriates to the department. Congress appropriated $286 million for the Title X Family Planning Program this year. This funding supports preventive care visits for nearly 3 million Americans each year. As part of this care, the Title X funds cervical cancer screenings, which detect possible signs of cancer in tens of thousands of women every year. If confirmed, will you commit to distribute every dollar that Congress appropriates for the life-saving Title X program in accordance with the law?
Thank you for the question, Senator Hassan, and I appreciated the opportunity to meet with you and talk about this issue before. The Title X issues that you're talking about, and particularly cancer screening, are issues that have hit my family, and we can't emphasize the importance of getting tested and being evaluated on those things. As I told you at the beginning here, I will follow the law when it comes to appropriations and managing, and I will lean heavily on my operating divisions to guide as to what the mission-critical funding is necessary.
All right, well, I appreciate that. Right now, the administration is withholding $500,000 in Title X money from my state, even though it has been appropriated, and it is supposed to be used for these cancer screenings, so I hope we can get to work to getting that money out. Finally, Mr. Switzer, we need to work on a bipartisan basis to counter China's unfair and abusive trade practices. Unfortunately, the president seems to back down every time there is a chance to hold the Chinese government accountable, like just this week extending the tariff pause on China without any clear wins for the United States. Meanwhile, the administration has targeted our allies like Canada with tariffs that raise costs for families in New Hampshire and damage our economic partnerships. As Deputy U.S. Trade Representative covering Asia, would you advise administration officials to reverse tariffs that target our allies like Canada in order to focus on actually combating unfair trade from adversaries like the Chinese government?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. That's what I will say specific. I'm not in right now, so the specifics of Canada are very difficult for me to speak about. But what I can say is that the totality of the trade policy of the president is to address a global problem. We have a global national security problem that is where China is at the center in many cases, but it's not solely about China. And so what I would say is that I would recommend that we continue to focus on China with the recognition that China is the second largest economy in the world.
And let me stop you because I'm over and I appreciate the chair's indulgence here. I just got back from a bipartisan trip to Canada. Our best friends to our north, my state's biggest trading partner, are having to look elsewhere for the kind of partnerships that are going to undermine our relationship and, frankly, our joint security interests with Canada, who is a highly cooperative and constructive partner with northern border security as well as other issues. We are making a grave mistake in the way we are treating Canada, and it is going to haunt us for years if we do not change quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, so let's go over these claim by claim. All right, first she starts off with talking about the methadone and Suboxone or buprenorphine, whatever you want to call it. Now, I don't know much about methadone, but I do know a bit about the buprenorphine or the Suboxone, right? Now, this is, once again, this is a drug that they prescribe to people that were addicted to opioids, you know, like pills, Oxycontins, fentanyl. Now, I'm not going to lie, it's better than being on fentanyl or being on Oxycontins or something like that. But once again, this is just, it's a synthetic opioid that is highly addictive. So you're just jumping from the frying pan into the fire, essentially. It's not much better, right? Once again, it is a little bit better because it's more controlled. However, you know, you're still on crutches, essentially. You're not doing anything for the addiction. Now, these clinics that give out these drugs, right? This is where the problem comes in because they're rife with abuse. And I don't think we need to be supplying money to these places and, you know, subsidizing it from the government, essentially, is what I'm getting at here. I don't like subsidizing anything from the government, so that's generally my position. Now, I do think we need research into finding cures, something that can release people from their addictions without the chemical side effects, with the internal body chemical side effects, because there's a lot. Your body, becomes dependent on these drugs. I'm not a doctor, so don't take my word for none of this. This is just experience, if you will. We'll put it that way. So, these are highly addictive. They're just as hard to come off of. So just opening a clinic and, sending money from the federal government to these places isn't helping with the addiction crisis that we have in this country. It's real bad. This is one of those things where the healthcare system tends to just keep you sickly, keep you dependent on that healthcare system instead of giving you options for cures to get you off of healthcare. I can't stand that. So, but, these ideas, they just, I wish there was a better way. Once again, like I said, I wish we could dump some research into finding a cure-all for opioid addiction. We just don't have it yet. But I just don't think that replacing one drug with another drug is a fix-all for everything, right? It's just putting a Band-Aid on a gangrenous infection, essentially. But let's go on to the next claim. The senator happens to mention this.
Unfortunately, the president seems to back down every time there is a chance to hold the Chinese government accountable, like just this week extending the tariff pause on China without any clear wins for the United States.
Okay, so once again, tell me you're deranged with Donald Trump without telling me you're deranged with Donald Trump. She's inserting taco into this, right? These people don't understand negotiations. Or they're just deranged with Donald Trump and they just want to try to bash Trump with anything and everything that they possibly can. They're grasping at anything and everything to do, right? Extending the tariff pause. That's because there's currently negotiations going on and you don't want to implement the tariffs while you're negotiating trade policy. These people are just lying about all of this stuff, right? They know this. This is a senator. She's not an idiot. They know these things, but they want to lie. They want to make the administration look bad, and I find it ridiculous. Let's go on to the next claim, though. Okay, she goes on to say this.
Our best friends to our north, my state's biggest trading partner, are having to look elsewhere for the kind of partnerships that are going to undermine our relationship and, frankly, our joint security interests with Canada, who is a highly cooperative and constructive partner with northern border security as well as other issues.
Okay, so that's just not true. Canada is not our friend. Let me ask you something right now. Let's say you have an agreement with your neighbor that, hey, look, we're going to cut our yards on the same day, right? And I'm going to cut right here, and you're going to cut your part of the yard, whatever agreement you come to. And your neighbor doesn't uphold their end of that bargain. They start just not cutting their grass at all, making your yard look bad. I know this is a ridiculous extreme example here, but I'm getting to a point. Okay, so they're not cutting their grass, they're not doing their thing, and making the neighborhood look bad or whatever. Okay, so that's essentially what Canada is doing. We had an agreement between Mexico, America, and Canada, a trade agreement where it was supposed to be free trade between all three countries. Okay, Canada was not upholding that. They had issued tariffs on a lot of dairy products. In some cases, 200, I think almost 300% tariffs on most dairy products. Cheese, milks, sour cream, you name it, right? They were tariffing us on this. They were not securing their border. She says they were a good partner. No, they're not a good partner. You know how many tons of fentanyl comes across that northern border? Yeah, it's a lot. Not nearly as much as the southern border, but it's still way too much for a highly developed nation like Canada, who is supposed to be our best friends, to allow to come across the border. They allow unmitigated immigration to come into their country, and those people migrate into the U.S. They don't care about stopping them at all. Canada is not our best friend, right? They don't keep up with NATO, their spending on defense with NATO. If it was not for the United States, Canada would not exist, essentially. And I don't mean that they would be obliterated, but our proximity and our strength of military keeps Canada safe. You would think that they would be a little bit more grateful for what we do for Canada. Their economy booms because of our economy. If it was not for the United States, like I said, Canada would not exist. I just don't understand this idea that these senators need to get out there and lie about these things. They could tell the truth about these things, but they don't do these things. Maybe she's ignorant to the tariffs that Canada imposed on us. Maybe she's ignorant to the amount of fentanyl that Canada allows to flow across that northern border. I mean, why do you think Donald Trump imposed tariffs in the first place and told them, clean up your side of the border? Right? That was pretty much issuing a warning to Canada. Look, we know what you're doing. We know what's being allowed to come across that border. Do something about it, or we will, right? And what did Canada do? They threw a temper tantrum. Would our friends do that? Would your friend need to impose sanctions on you, right, in the form of tariffs to get you to cut your yard? No, you should do it because you agreed to do it. That was a verbal agreement, signed agreement, whatever it may be. You agreed to do that. You need to keep your word. And that's what Canada is not doing. Canada is not keeping their word. And they're not our good friends. They need to come back into alignment with defense spending. They need to come back into alignment with our border policies. We can't do everything, folks. Once again, we're spending in a $1.8 trillion deficit. We just can't handle that. America won't be here if we continue down this path of just spending for the sake of spending. It's almost like it's obligatory or something like that. Like we feel obligated to spend all this money in a deficit. It's ridiculous. It's very, very fiscally irresponsible. And I don't understand any argument to the contrary. Why should we spend money in a deficit? Doesn't make any sense. I've never, ever heard a good argument. All I've heard is railing and screaming and gnashing of teeth about, oh, we need these funds for this program over here and this. Nothing as to why. Why should we spend in a deficit, devalue our own dollar, make your purchasing power go down, make your daily life harder? I just don't get these ideas, but, nobody's ever given me a good explanation on any of this. But I've rambled on for way too long, so y'all let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comments section, because once again, folks, these senators, they just don't care at all about truth. And that's what I'm here to do, is expose the truth. That's it. That's it. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. You might be thinking, oh, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Maybe I don't. That doesn't stop me from exposing the lies that these senators put out into the ether every single freaking day. But like I said, I've rambled on for long enough. Y'all don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. And sign up and become a member. And you guys, y'all remember that God is always with us. And He loves each and every one of you. So y'all remember that. And y'all try to have a good day. And stay legitical. Peace.